On this episode of The Heart of Teaching Music, former director of the Marine Band and director of bands at the University of Michigan, Jason Fettig.
I remember I stayed with my Uncle Tommy, who lived in Virginia. He asked why I was there, and I said, well, I'm here to take an audition for the President's Own. He's like, the President's Own? You know, that's like a real famous band. It's like, I know Uncle Tommy. He's like, you're a kid. I was like, I know that too, Uncle Tommy. So my first call after I won the audition on the payphone down in the lounge at the Marine Band was to Uncle Tommy. And what joy I said, well, Uncle Tommy, I need a ride home. And guess what? I won the audition.
Hi, I'm Julia Baumanis.
And I'm Scott Edgar. Welcome to the Heart of Teaching Music.
Because without people, there is no music. This space is dedicated to the stories behind the sound.
Stories of identity, belonging, and the courage to make a difference through music.
Join us as we welcome leaders in music and music education who share their journeys, their challenges,
and what it truly means to teach, connect, and lead in our profession. Together, we'll explore why music matters and discover the true power of music for all.
We'd like to thank GIA Publications as our episode sponsor. Without their support, episodes like this are not possible, and these are incredibly valuable episodes with fantastic guests. Hi, Jason. Scott and I are really excited to talk to you today about what you believe the heart of teaching music is. To give our audience a little bit of a background, if you don't already know Jason's wonderful career and how he has served music education and artistry in our country, the 28th director of the President's Own United States Marine Band and Chamber Orchestra, and is now currently serving as the 8th director of university bands at University of Michigan. And because of Scott, I have to say go blue. I have no lineage or title to it, but go blue for Scott and Jason.
Go blue.
We always like to frame a little bit of our conversation with our opening question, and that is, in your opinion, what is the heart of teaching music?
Well, Julia and Scott, first of all, thank you for having me on this wonderful podcast. It's great to see you and have a chance to talk to you. And I guess I should have expected that opening question, the heart of teaching music. I feel like I've been teaching for a long time, but kind of unofficially until I got here to Michigan a couple of years ago. And now I'm deeply immersed in it, as you might imagine. And I don't know if the motivation has changed much from my old job in the Marines working with professionals, which is that, the heart of teaching music is about service and it's about creating connections. As teachers, we're always looking to experience that joy of discovery. Finding our students, finding themselves and a sense of self-worth that, is always built by discovering new things and growing. And I think that connection runs both ways. We as teachers, we feel it too, just as much as the students feel that joy of discovery. I think we feel the joy of watching that happen and remembering how it felt when we were learning as well. So that's got to be the heart of teaching, is just serving and creating that community with each other.
I think that's incredibly powerful. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about today and I mean this as a term of endearment, an Army brat. Both of my parents immigrated to this country, joined the military, and met each other in services in the U.S. Army. I was brought up with understanding that part of your responsibility as a human, take the music and the occupation part out of all of it, part of our responsibility as a human being on this planet is to coexist and serve people in our community. And that's how we're able to move forward and progress. Could you speak a little bit about how that's emulated in the military ensembles? There are a lot of listeners who are curious about that side of the profession. And I do think that's one of the incredibly unique qualities of military music in my outsider perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thanks to your parents for their service and you as well as a family member of those who served. It definitely gets in your blood. I got into the Marine Band when I was 21 years old. And so I had a sense of who I was, but it was an underdeveloped sense of what was important to me. And when I got into the Marine Band, not only was I joining an incredible musical organization, of course, as you know, but I was joining the United States Marine Corps, and a tradition and an expectation for how you view the world that is shaped entirely by service, by doing the right thing, by answering a call, whatever that call is, whether it's convenient for you or natural for you. It didn't matter. You were making music on behalf of a much larger purpose. And when you first get into that situation, it takes a little bit of getting used to. I think when people join the service right out of the civilian world, as I did, you don't really know what you're getting into, especially if you don't have a military family as you did. And then it lands on you almost like a thunderbolt. After about a year or a year and a half, you suddenly realize that you are becoming part of that community and upholding those standards. And that standard is that you do the right thing and you help others no matter the situation. One of the beautiful things about being in the Marine Band is that music, which we all feel so deeply about, became suddenly alive for me, not just my own experience in playing or conducting, but seeing the value of it across the whole spectrum of what we did in the Marine Corps, from playing concerts for the public and for tourists to traveling across the country to performing at the White House, of course, for presidents and famous people and visiting dignitaries, all the way to Arlington National Cemetery in the freezing cold or in the terrible heat of the summer, and watching the impact of that music making on those families who were laying to rest one of their own. You were hit in the face with this idea that music does matter and that it was a gift towards something that was bigger than any of us. It sounds like a cliche, but sometimes we can forget about that. And I was never allowed to forget about that in my service in the Marine Corps. I was reminded of it every single day. And even now, as I'm retired, my sense of that burns really brightly in me. And I've been trying really hard during my time here at Michigan to help communicate that to my students and to my colleagues.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any better antidote for burnout than feeling that music is a service to humanity and a service to bringing people together.
Yeah. The thing you mentioned about playing in services at Arlington, my father is buried in a national cemetery and he died due to his service. It's such an overwhelming feeling and there's so much grief. And the most beautiful point of that day, honestly, was the bugler that came and played taps. And the band director and me, in 1 second, I was like, oh gosh, what if he cracks a note? I'm never going to. Of course he didn't crack a note. Of course, it was the most beautiful tone. And I understand as a band director and as a musician, the amount of time and effort and responsibility that human being put into this 30 seconds. So it is palpable what you're talking about. And I've seen it firsthand. So thank you.
Jason, such powerful stories from your time with the Marines. And I'm curious about what it was like from that transition with the Marines to now at the University of Michigan. As Julia alluded, I got my doctorate at University of Michigan, and a place that means a great deal to me, a place that I would say holds amazing tradition that you've experienced both at the Marine Corps and now that you experience in Ann Arbor. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that transition's been like and maybe some of the commonalities around this idea of tradition?
Yeah, well, first of all, Scott, go blue. And it's always great to see a Wolverine. Talk about tradition. One of the things that has impressed me, he's putting on his Michigan hat now. I love it. One of the things that impressed me and has always impressed me about the University of Michigan is that a Rutgers.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Our listeners have no idea what's happening right now. Michigan has sent out so many incredible artists into the world. Many of them ended up in the President's own United States Marine Band, so I was aware of the University of Michigan and the quality of its instruction for many, many years, but they're all over the place. And we know that because of the huge alumni network that we have just in general. You can't go anywhere in the world without somebody shouting, "Go Blue" at you if you're wearing Michigan gear. I loved that fact that here was a university that's very relevant in carrying on that long tradition of success, especially in the band world, and sending out professionals to make a difference in this world. And that's what we hope we were doing in the Marine Band as well. So in some ways, the philosophy of moving from the military to moving to higher ed didn't change much, which is that we're all trying to be the very best we can be at our craft and make sure that it matters. What I think I was able or have been able to bring to Michigan is a real sense of whatever we teach and however we teach it and however we set up our students for success in their careers, whatever they choose to do, we want to make sure that idea that music stays relevant and stays helpful, stays at the forefront. That who are we making music for? How do we talk about what it is we do and why we love it? How do we continue to move the ball forward in keeping music relevant and continue letting it evolve? So those traditions that we have, we're always letting them evolve. We're always helping them move with the times. The biggest adjustment for me really was I didn't teach my colleagues in the Marine Band anything, right? I led them through doing their jobs at the highest level they could do. I was more of a coordinator, an artistic coordinator of their gifts than somebody who was really guiding them on how to do them better. Which was a great privilege in the sense you get to work with some of the best musicians in the world and basically just try to stay out of their way, provide good leadership, provide good information, provide inspiration where you can and let them do their jobs. That adjustment has been something for me to now come up with a process by which I can deconstruct what I've been doing for so many years successfully and explain it to my conducting students, explain it to my performance students and music education students, and help them understand the process by which they can be successful. But I've really enjoyed that process. I've really enjoyed not only taking a look at my own way of making music and deciding if that's helpful or not, but also finding a way to share stories and strategies with my students to help them get excited about what they're about to embark on. What you have in school, whether it's secondary school or in colleges, you have a lot of people who haven't made it yet. They haven't gotten to that point of their life where their identity is fully formed. They feel confident in what they're doing. So they're in that stage where they're just super excited to be immersed in music and trying to get as good as they can, but not knowing what the future looks like. And so if I can be a sense of security about helping them to understand what the future looks like and helping them to understand exactly how they could be most useful to our society and our collective of musicians, then that's my primary job here, I think, at the university.
Jason, absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that. And for the students at Michigan, they are better for it. I want to look at the other side of the coin of tradition. And I think there are parts of our profession that I think we can agree are probably pretty unhealthy. I have had chairs thrown in a rehearsal. I've had batons thrown at me, and guilt and shame and embarrassment have certainly been things that I know I've seen present in music classrooms. Can you speak a little bit to how you see, and you already started to work on this a little bit in your previous answer, Jason, but what are some healthy parts of tradition and what are some parts of tradition that are alive and well in music education that you think we need to move on from?
It's such an important question. Tradition is important to me. I spent 26 years in the Marine Corps, and so how could it not get into your blood? The healthy parts of tradition, both in the military, in my career in the Marines, and also here at the University of Michigan, which has a very long tradition, is looking at what has been built before us. What gifts do we receive from those who came before, who took great pride in their work and built something that we benefit from, whether it's excellence or an identity that is something to be proud of, a community, resources, all those things are really important. And we have a lot of tradition in music. And so I spend a lot of time with the music of John Philip Sousa, our older music, and making sure that that doesn't fall by the wayside, that is honored and preserved, and we still find value in those things that were established long ago. So I think that's a healthy part of tradition. I think as long as we're looking at it through the lens of 2026, there's nothing wrong with honoring the past and bringing out those wonderful things that have been gifted to us at any institution or in any community we're in. Where it becomes problematic is what you alluded to, is if that tradition is born of not building confidence in people and not building them up and seeing them and validating who they are, but rather trying to have them assimilate into something that isn't healthy for them or ultimately healthy for the collective. That's stopping progress. So tradition should never stop our ability to evolve and to adapt to who we are at any given moment. There's a way to have both. You can have a concert that has the music of Sousa and the music by living composers of color. And you can find creative ways to put both of those together and celebrate that entire spectrum of our musical heritage and our musical history. You can find a way to demand and ask for and encourage a high standard from students without throwing a chair at them or yelling at them or poking their eye out with a baton. I tell my students all the time that I'm going to hold them to a standard that I believe that they're capable of, but I will never purposely embarrass anybody in front of their peers. Talk a lot when I travel around the country with the high school students, especially, is this idea of imposter syndrome and confidence. You cannot be a good musician if you don't feel confident, if you don't feel supported. Criticism is sometimes necessary, but when it's given in disproportion to praise, what it simply does is shatters people's ability to believe that they can do it. And I know from firsthand experience that you have to be confident that you can before you reach your potential. So I think part of our job as teachers is not to give up on a standard that we know our students are capable of, but to teach from a perspective of trying to build confidence, trying to help our students understand what they can do and what they are good at, so that the things that they're not so good at can be built without shaking their sense of self. And it's a delicate balance, and it's a daily struggle, but it is achievable. And we've all seen the results of that when we really think critically about approaching our teaching in that way.
Our shared dear friend, Cameron Jenkins, says that we are in the business of people, and our responsibility is to be sort of like a forklift to raise them up even when they don't know that they could do what they are able to do just yet.
Let's take a quick break.
This episode is sponsored by GIA Publications. GIA is a leading publisher of music education resources. From music play for infants to beginning band and strings methods, college-level texts to music aptitude tests, books from leading voices in music education to top-notch recordings, GIA has something for you. Visit GIAmusic.com to learn more. GIAmusic.com.
HOTM friends, we want to hear your voice. Do you have a comment, a general question, or even a question for a specific future guest? Great, because you can be a part of a future episode. Visit musicforall.org/podcasts for a list of future guests. And then all you have to do is click the Ask a Question button. We may include your voice in a future episode. Again, to record your question, just go to musicforall.org/podcasts. Let's rejoin our conversation.
I wanted to ask a little bit about your advice. A lot of our listeners are people who experience that imposter syndrome that you mentioned, especially the teachers sometimes feel that, but certainly the students that are listening to it as they're preparing for auditions, trying to make advances in their career. You yourself have experienced what I can only imagine have been the highest pressure situations possible. In high pressure situations, how have you personally calmed yourself, focused on the task at hand to move forward and to lead in the best to your ability for your ensemble? And then what advice would you give students who are facing those high pressure situations themselves?
I think the first thing to say, and I've said this often, is that I really believe everyone experiences imposter syndrome, regardless of their perceived level of success or confidence.
Yes.
I speak firsthand that I have had multiple times in my life where I have had raging case of imposter syndrome. And it's really been most notable at every transition in my professional life. So when I first got into the Marine Band at 21 years old, I was like, somebody made a mistake. I'm not qualified to be in this band. How could I ever go from being at a state university in New England to being in one of the best bands in the world? How is that possible? When I was identified to be an assistant director with no professional conducting experience, and at that time, no advanced degree in conducting, again, I was like, this is insane. I can't do this. There's no way. Who in their right mind would have said, yeah, we'd like you to take on this job? And same thing happened when I became the director. I'm like, I'm not qualified to lead this 225-year-old organization. I'm going to be the last director of the Marine Band. I'm going to be the one who kicks it into the stands. Then I get hired at the University of Michigan. And I'm like, did anybody look at my resume? I don't have the qualifications to teach at one of the best music schools in the world. Every way. I mean, after 20, 30 years of experience, I still felt that I wasn't going to do a good job. And this is with a whole host of successes on my resume. And I still, as a human being, felt like I'm going to mess this up this time. So as a word of encouragement to everybody, you are not alone. we all feel the same way. And even the ones who you swear don't feel that way secretly, I believe they do. They're just really good at hiding it.
Yeah.
How have we coped? How do we get over this sense of, I don't think I can do this? There's a couple different ways. Number one is simply born of remembering when you did it well. You know, the more experience you have, the more years you live and work, the more successes you're going to have. We have no problem remembering when we screw up. We have no problem going home and beating ourselves up about making a mistake or not having a good performance or saying the wrong thing in a classroom. We have a lot of trouble remembering when we did something well. And so I think of it almost like a bank account. You're putting deposits in every time you have a success. Put a deposit in that bank account, and you will mess up at some point. You're human. But when you mess up, you look at that bank account and you're like, okay, I still have a pretty good balance in that bank account, meaning I've had more success than failures in my life. I've got to find a way to keep this one in perspective. And it's almost like training your mind to know that you're going to mess up, but the idea is just not to mess up more than you actually have success and not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And that's the learning process. That's the evolution we all go through as human beings, whether in our personal lives or our professional lives. So that's helped me. I have more confidence now than I did 10 years ago because I've had that much more experience, and I've done better than I expected sometimes. And I could reasonably say, if I did well last time, why can't I do well again? And that's helped. The other thing that helped me cope over the years with that sense of insecurity or a sense of inexperience and not knowing if I was going to be good or not was to lean on the service aspect of it. And this is where the Marine Corps taught me some really important lessons. When I was selected to be an assistant director at 25 with no practical experience and a pretty high likelihood that I was going to screw up, and I did screw up many times, but I survived and everything was fine in the end. It's that whole thing is it's going to be okay. It doesn't feel like it's going to, but most of the time it's going to be okay. You just can't believe it at the moment. But I kept telling myself in those moments, I said, if not me, then who? So maybe I'm not the perfect person for this opportunity, but if I don't do it, who's going to do it instead of me? So on several times during my life and career, I came to the conclusion that, look, I'm going to do the best I can. And right now, I'm probably the best person for this particular responsibility. For better or for worse, someone said, we believe in you. We think you're the right person. And so I tell people, when someone tells you that you're the right person for this, believe them and use that as one tool to help build your confidence. And it's about service. It's like, if not me, then who? So it's going to be me, and I'm going to do the very best I can with what I know and what I have.
That's beautiful. A music ed professor of mine, I call my music ed grandfather, Clifford Madsen, says, positives come and go, negatives accumulate. And I love the idea of it being this transaction bank account. You have to build your reserve of positive wins and be able to access that reserve when you need it the most. That's very powerful. Thank you for all that.
I wonder if we can wind it back, because I see so much of what we do when we get to the highest level of our craft as being about accountability. I'm accountable for my preparation. I'm accountable for my performance. I'm accountable for my wins. I'm accountable for my losses, and I own it all. I wonder how we can start to build that skill, maybe that disposition even earlier, thinking back to fifth graders who are just starting their instruments. How do we build that idea that we need to be accountable, and this can be a skill that we can learn through music education?
It's a great question, Scott. I think it starts outside of music. Music certainly can be a catalyst for teaching responsibility, teaching community, collaboration, processing, negotiation, all the things that we talk about as music educators that we know are super valuable about the arts and about music in general. But accountability really, I think, starts with just, again, the idea of caring about other people. It starts with empathy. I hate it when people say that empathy is not important. Empathy is everything, is that we can't understand ourselves until we work to understand others around us. And we learn from trying to get in their shoes, feel what they feel best we can, and then find the commonalities between our experiences. Everybody has a different lived experience, different background, different resources, but we are all human. We all have a heart. We all have a brain, and there are shared experiences. And so if we work to care about what someone else is experiencing, we work to understand what they need and what they want, we become more attuned to what we need and what we want out of those relationships as well. So as far as 5th grade, 6th grade, you're looking for a classroom where teachers do explore that. They do explore thinking about what everyone else is experiencing at that time and talking about the differences and talking about the similarities. The beautiful thing about music is that we have a chance to do it while accomplishing something together technically, and also to immediately, in an integrated way, talk about the emotional impact that what we have together means. So I think that it happens inside and outside of the musical experience. What the musical experience gives students is hopefully a safe place to create a laboratory for that kind of human interaction. And hopefully also create a space where self-confidence is built by achieving something together. And knowing that everyone's contribution was important to the whole, but that the whole is what we're actually trying to accomplish. And that's another thing the Marine Corps taught me in abundance, which is that nobody cares who gets the credit. What happens is we accomplish the mission together, whether it's a musical mission or something else, and we all feel a collective pride in having done that together. That was a really powerful lesson. And when that product or that mission or that end result is so stupendous time and time and time again, you do get to a point where you don't care what part of it was yours. You're just happy to be in that room and on that team, making beautiful things happen for other people.
Wow. We've heard a lot about, how impactful the service has been for you. And I think you mentioned you didn't come from a military family. This was sort of all brand new to you when you experienced. But I want to maybe go backwards in time a little bit prior to your military service and maybe even prior to college music education. Was there a particular influential music educator or teacher to you even before all of this stuff happened? I'm just curious.
Jason was not someone who you would consider would end up as a colonel in the United States Marine Corps. Jason was the class clown, a sarcastic, skinny little kid. Had a little bit of an unusual parental background. My parents split when I was relatively young, and I went to a different school every year from 3rd grade to high school.
Wow.
Just by the way that the situation worked out. And so I became very good at making friends quickly. I became good at kind of leaning on the things that helped me feel confident so that I wouldn't shrink in that situation of being in a new environment. Music was one of those things. My mom started me on clarinet when I was in 2nd grade. So I started early. She really wanted me to be a musician. I stuck with it. I chose the clarinet because it was black, and black was my favorite color. That was it. Had no idea what it sounded like. Didn't know anything about it, but I did take to it early and I stuck with it. I had a wonderful clarinet teacher when I was younger named Carlene DeLova, who was really encouraging, and she helped me to really enjoy going to lessons and enjoy the act of practicing, which of course is critical when students are younger and they don't have that motivation early. And I stay in touch with Carlene to this day. So a lifelong friend, which I'm so grateful for. And then had wonderful experiences growing up in band mostly. My high school band director was a tremendous influence on me, very passionate about what he did. There were a few chairs that got thrown in that band room, Scott, but not at us, just thrown to demonstrate passion for us, to demonstrate the carpe diem sense of seizing the day and seizing the moment and not giving up on these opportunities. So every time a chair got close to a student, he'd panic a little bit because he knew he's not supposed to do that. But David Bresnahan was my high school band director, and David is a very special person. And taught us that music, that was the first lesson I learned, was that music matters, from David Bresnahan. We had a classmate who passed away playing basketball during our high school years, and he brought the entire band out to graveside to perform as they lowered our friend into the ground and to pay our respects as his classmates. And I remember Dave, Mr. B, saying to us, don't forget this. Don't forget how precious life is and how quickly it can be taken away. And don't forget what music means to each other. And it just burned into my brain. I was 16 years old and had no idea at that point that I would go into the Marine Corps and have a similar experience, Julia, as you were talking about with your dad, over and over and over again, and understand that in the rest of the world, this was also the case, that music was that powerful and that important. But I was the class clown. And so joining the Marine Corps, and going to college for music and kind of getting into that realm where I was going to do this for a living was interesting. I was definitely open to wherever my musical life was going to take me, but I didn't think it was going to be in the service. I had not considered a military career. I took the Marine Band audition almost on a whim. I happened to come across an announcement for the band having an opening for clarinet the summer before I was student teaching and decided to just see what it was like to audition for a military band with no expectations. Little did I know that they were actually going to offer me the position at the end of that audition day and change the course of my life.
Wow. It's powerful. We have found, talking to a lot of our guests, that it was always an unexpected path of some kind that has led them to where they're going to be. That everybody has talked about. It was a calling that they didn't hear at first. And then when they heard it, there was integral people in their lives to say, you better go ahead and take it. But this time it seems kind of just, happenstance. Maybe like, let's see where it winds up. And then lo and behold, here you are after taking an audition on a whim. I think it's beautiful. It seems to be a common thing amongst all our guests that they didn't think that this was going to be where they would wind up.
It is. It's a series of right place, right time, it seems, is always the case. I talk to students a lot about this because there's so much pressure in our lives to decide what we're going to be, decide what we want to do, and decide exactly where that's going to end up. And you both know as well as I do that you're right maybe 5% of the time. It's amazing the people who, when they're 8 years old, decide that they're going to be the director of bands at the University of Michigan. And then lo and behold, they end up there. It was a little more common in the Marine Band that we had people who their lifelong dream was to get into the President's Own, and then they do, which was wonderful. Yeah. Was not mine. I just went through these random open doors that happened to be there. And almost every time, and I'm sure I share the same feeling with a lot of our colleagues, almost every time that door opened, I thought to myself, that's not the door for me. Not because I didn't want that opportunity, I just didn't feel like I was qualified. And that Marine Band audition was the first door I went through that I really didn't want to go through because I didn't want to make a fool out of myself. And of all people, you talk about people pushing us to do things we don't think we're capable of. It was my stepmom, who's not a musician, who knew nothing about the Marine Band. She heard me talk about it. She's the one, Katie, who said, are you going to go take that audition? I said, no, I was just fooling around. I'm not really qualified for that. And she's like, well, why don't you? And I didn't have a good answer. So I bought a plane ticket and I flew to Washington and took the audition. I remember I stayed with my Uncle Tommy, who lived in Virginia, and he asked why I was there. And I said, well, I'm here to take an audition for the President's Own. He's like, the President's Own? That's like a real famous band. It's like, I know Uncle Tommy. He's like, you're a kid. I was like, I know that too, Uncle Tommy. So my first call after I won the audition on the payphone down in the lounge at the Marine Band was to Uncle Tommy. And what joy I said, well, Uncle Tommy, I need a ride home. And guess what? I won the audition. But there was that opportunity. Then auditioning to become one of the assistant directors with no relevant experience was also another door that I went through that I had no expectations. And frankly, applying to become the director of bands here at the University of Michigan was also one of those moments. I was like, well, probably not qualified, but I've had enough experiences in my life where you just have to go for it and see what happens. And being prepared for the answer to be no, but knowing that it's never going to be yes unless you try. So I tell students all the time, I was like, you're going to end up where you're supposed to be. You just don't know it yet, but it requires you to gather enough courage to walk through that door and see what's on the other side. And so often it turns into something that changes your life.
Yeah.
Jason, such a powerful journey. Another person who I know that we share in common is composer Jim Stevenson. And I know that you've worked with him deeply at the Marine Band, at the University of Michigan, and in a lot of different chapters of your life. In fact, he lives about 3 miles just on the other side of the building where I'm recording here in Lake Forest, Illinois. And a dear friend, he's adjunct at Lake Forest College. And Jim is another person who started out as a professional trumpet player and turned into something that he doubted that he could do to be able to make a career being a full-time composer. Jim is going to be a guest on this show in the coming months as well. Well, surprise, Jason, Jim recorded a question that he has for you.
Hello, Jason. This is Jim Stevenson. We've worked together on a few occasions. As a composer, of course, my question will be a little bit composer-centric. How obvious should we make it in our scores the level of emotional tension or content that we want you to impart onto your students? In other words, how much work does a conductor need to or want to do in order to find the message in the composer's score? This is something I struggle with because I like to sort of discover those things on my own if I'm studying a score, but that may not be every director's point of view. So I'm just curious, how much should a composer put in there so that you have no doubt what needs to be said to your ensemble so that you can quickly, efficiently deliver messages, but also maybe have the opportunity to inspire them with your own interpretation?
Well, that's such an important question. And thank you to Jim for jumping into our podcast. It is true that Jim and I have become great friends, frequent collaborators, and it all started in 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. Actually, it was 2012 when I was introduced to Jim's music and I had a chance to conduct a world premiere of his oboe concerto with Alex Klein, the oboist. And I immediately took to Jim's work, and then even better when I met him as a person, took to him as a human being. And it's been such a wonderful friendship that we've shared over more than a decade now. And I had a chance to premiere his second symphony, which has become ubiquitous in the entire band community because it's such a fantastic and, apropos of his question, deeply emotional and personal work.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to start there to Jim's question, because when he wrote that symphony entitled Voices, he wrote it and said it was inspired by just the idea of voices across the globe. And although we speak different languages, we speak one language as far as our human emotion and our connection on this earth. And it's a beautiful concept. What Jim didn't tell me at the time until later was that was part of the inspiration. The other part of the inspiration was the death of his mom and him having a reckoning with that loss and how to put that into his music. And the reason Jim didn't share that initially is he didn't want it to be personal. He didn't want this piece to be about him or about his mom, even though that was a lot of the genesis of the emotion. He wanted it to be open for everyone to interpret and to feel however they feel. And for better or for worse, I encouraged him to share that inspiration because this goes back to the empathy that I talked about earlier in the episode here, which is that if we don't really know what someone else is going through, then we are making it up and we are putting our own ideas on top of what someone else may be feeling. Could there be any more personal relationship than that between composer and band, composer and conductor, composer and audience? We're taking their children, their musical children, and we are bringing them to life and then sharing them with other people. So the answer to Jim's question is both. I both want to feel like I can come to this music with my own experiences and my own emotion and my own needs and hopes that I would want to share with the musicians, share with the audience. And I want to know where it came from. I want to know what sparked this art to begin with. And I would leave it up to the composer to decide how specific they want to be for each piece. Maybe a piece like the symphony is something that is so personal and so relatable, i.e. losing someone that you love dearly and understanding they will never be with you in the physical world again, but that doesn't mean they're gone. Everyone on earth can understand that and then bring their own experiences to it. So sharing that intent is very helpful, I think, to the interpreter. If there's music that's a little more objective, if there is no story and there is no specific emotion, it's just sounds that are meant to elicit feelings in people, then we could leave it more open. But I will always defer to the creator, to the composer in these worlds, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand composer's intent. We want to get as close as we can to how the composer wanted this music to sound. And then with their permission, we put our own stamp on that sound that they've already created and brought into the world.
Yeah. As we kind of come to the end of our time together, Scott and I, what you don't see is that we have a running document of all the really beautiful gems that our guests have left us. And I know what my gem is. And then I want Scott maybe to share what your gem is because I'm reading it right now. My gem that you said today was empathy is everything. Full stop. It doesn't matter what occupation, art, no art, just as human beings, empathy is everything. And if we could unlock that we could have a much fuller, fulfilling, understanding, loving life together on this planet. Scott, what's your gem?
Julia stole mine, but I'm going to channel the inner Yoda that Jason offered us, and never going to be yes unless you try. There is no try, only do. And so many of our students freeze, whether it be because of vulnerability or whether it be because they don't think it's going to be successful, or so many other social challenges that are surrounding it. And our music classrooms can be places where I think we can help our students with that bravery, with that courage. And Jason, that epitomized that.
Uh-huh. It's been wonderful getting to hear a little bit about you and young Jason and current Jason and the career and how it's all been so impactful to not just you, but everybody that you've led in this musical life. Any parting words for our listeners?
Well, I very much appreciate that. And I appreciate these really thoughtful questions and the opportunity just to speak about this beyond the notes and beyond the technical aspect of being a musician, to talk about why we actually do it in the first place. And I suppose my parting idea is just embodied in the title, Music for All, and the idea that what's so beautiful about what we do in the arts is that it is available to everybody. Whether they create it, listen to it, consume it, share it, it doesn't matter. The access to it is the important part, the opportunity to not only listen to music, but to watch people creating it together. And that is what fosters the empathy. You know, people wonder, what does it feel like to be a part of something bigger than themselves? Well, we have an opportunity to be a part of that every single day. And band, selfishly, since I'm a band guy, band is the epitome of that, because band has always been the music of the people. The Marine Band's been around, in case in point, for more than 2 centuries. And band is the ensemble that plays all kinds of music and mixes all kinds of ideas and genres and backgrounds of composers and musicians. It's always available for everyone to take part in, regardless of your ability or your experience. And once you get into that space where you realize it's okay to just be you and to come to that experience honestly and safely without judgment, then all kinds of beautiful things can happen, whether it's in the classroom or in our community band. I'm really grateful to have fallen into this particular aspect of our artistic community because it's what helps people feel validated for being alive, having the opportunity to get to know each other. And on the empathy piece, Julia, I just want to finish by saying the great thing about empathy is that it flows both ways. As soon as we are empathetic to someone else's experience, it encourages them to be empathetic to ours. In the Marine Corps, we used to say officers eat last, because everyone else who you're leading, they get to be taken care of first because they're doing the job. But officers still eat. We're not martyrs. We are human beings, and we all need something, but we can give it to each other in equal measure. And I think that should be the goal.
I think our music teachers needed to hear that, Jason, because I think oftentimes, yes, we eat last, but we need to eat.
Jason, thank you so much for spending some time with us and offering your beautiful and really powerful words. I know this episode is going to reach people that need it right now. So thank you very, very much. And we'd like to thank our episode's sponsor, GIA Publications, for making this possible. For Music for All, I'm Julia Baumanis.
And I'm Scott Edgar.
And this has been The Heart of Teaching Music.